All right, we're live. Welcome everyone to Table Talk. I'm your host, the Bad Luck Gamer, with my co-host Glue Boy
Hello, hello.
and our wonderful guests.
Hi, I'm Luis Loza, creative director for the rules and lore side of Pathfinder 2nd Edition.
I'm very excited for this chat today. We got a lot of people who are already starting to hop into chat, but as
Sure.
always, we tend to get to the subject somewhere in the 20-25 minute range. So if you're watching after the fact or you're trying to catch up, you can just hop to there. So in the meantime, we're just gonna chat about what's been going on.
Yeah.
So before stream, we were talking about the Aurora Borealis. It was
Yes.
a very, very exciting event. We actually, my fiance and I almost missed it because we went out and we were waiting at like this big, nice open area where there's just nothing but water around. But she has to work in the morning and it was really late and we're like, okay, I guess we'll have to drive back. We couldn't wait any longer. And as we were driving back, we saw just like a stream of light down in the sky.
Yeah.
So we pulled over and we got to see it as it started in like this big open field area, which was really, really nice.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I went, an hour out of town into where it was dark, and I was out there as late as I think I could do it. I got home at 3 a.m. Having watched it for so long. It was incredible.
3 a.m. Wow.
Yeah. I didn't have anything to do the next day, so
That's
it was fine.
fair.
It's such like a crazy occurrence to see it in person, especially like no travel, just kind of like in your own backyard, basically.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I was gonna milk it for all it was worth. Yeah,
exactly.
It's definitely worth it. You know, it's funny. I have family in Norway, so I've been to Norway a few times. Never seen it up there. I have family who live near like the North Pole almost,
sure.
and never seen it. But here we are getting it this one time in Washington. It's crazy.
People, I was hearing. So I'm from Nebraska originally, so people back home in Nebraska were seeing it. People down in Arkansas were seeing it. It was incredible. I guess that we just got really lucky with all of that.
Happened at the right time of day and or night, I guess. So yeah. Other than that, I guess I don't know. What do you do like in your free time? You know, like a gamer?
I play Pathfinder. It turns out.
Yeah.
Good.
Good call.
Yeah. Thursdays is when my regular group meets, so I would actually normally be jumping off of this and immediately jumping into my game. But I'm like, oh, guys, I'm gonna call it off this, just so I don't, if it runs a little later or whatever, it's not a big deal. And
thank you.
they have to deal with it because I'm the GM, and too bad, right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Play Pathfinder. I play other RPGs. I'm really into the Star Wars RPG that Fantasy Flight put out some years back.
Yes,
Edge of the
another
Empire
fan
stuff.
of those games.
Yeah.
Those games are so good.
I love those very much. Recently got into Hades 2 after loving Hades 1. Yeah, I play games, but I'm also going out. The area is beautiful. There's lots of cool stuff to hit up.
You're not a complete nerd. I see.
I am,
You get some
but
grass.
I managed to also be a nerd for the outdoors, or at least anywhere that isn't just at this computer, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so fun. I love hearing just any sort of good talk on the Fantasy Flight Star Wars games.
Yeah.
I'm in the perpetual state of like, personally, I'm not a major Star Wars fan. Like a lot of the lore and the stuff doesn't really do it for me. However, the Fantasy Flight Star Wars game, I think, has one of my absolute favorite dice systems I've ever interacted with in a tabletop game.
Absolutely.
It's something I rant about all the time because I see as our group and just on Camp's channel, we cover a lot of different tabletop games because we really like the idea of just trying out a lot of new games. We love indie tabletop games and all that. We keep finding games that are so adjacent to like touching its design, and it's like, please, just take the next step. It looks scary, but it's so good.
Yeah. One of the things that initially was like it slowed us down, right? It's like figuring out the dice, right? They have their D12s and D8s and D10s and stuff in terms of shape, but they have these different symbols, and what happens is you mix and match symbols and figure out like what you got. And for a while that just like felt like it slowed things down so much, but eventually once I started playing it on Foundry, and it immediately told me the result of
Oh.
like, oh, you got this many successes, this many failures, so your net result is 2 successes or whatever, right? That made it a lot faster. And my group, we play online, but one of our friends that is part of that group managed to come visit recently. And as a result, all of us were in town at the same time, and we got to play in person. And doing it with the dice again, I was able to like finally figure out, oh, here's a quick system of doing it. Just match the opposite dice, and those get canceled out immediately, and it makes it a lot faster. And having gotten used to it, it's great. I think it's incredible. I just really appreciate that when you roll, most of the time something happens. Something interesting can happen, and the player still has a choice to do something. I can count on 2 hands the number of times that like dice have been rolled and the net result is nothing, right? Like,
Right.
so there's always something interesting. Even if you like miss your attack in combat or whatever, you have something cool you can do. Like, oh, I'm gonna give my buddy a boost, and they can roll extra dice or whatever, or make a person drop their weapon or knock prone or something, and still are doing something even if it wasn't directly damaging someone. So that's just really interesting to me, and I really enjoy it.
It's a great dice system that opens up like perfect collaborative storytelling,
Yeah.
and adding a mechanical sense to it. Because I vividly remember the first moment it clicked for me when I was playing it. We were all doing this like chase sequence, breaking out this guy from like an empire, like a starship, and like we were quickly running out to our ship. And it was a moment I was trying to just shoot a stormtrooper. I was playing a droid gunslinger, and I miss. So instead, but I got like a bunch of advantages.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, instead of shooting, I shoot a vent on the side, like a pipe, and a bunch of steam comes out and blocks our way temporarily, like slowing them down so we can turn a corner without getting shot. It's like a thing like that, like a perfect little mechanical benefit. And also my biggest feels bad is I hate full wasted actions of like all these resources I'm wasted because the dice said no. So it's a great game. I love it so much. I want someone to steal its dice system so bad.
They made a generic version of it. I don't know if you know the Genesis system.
Oh, I didn't know this.
Yeah, they ripped out the dice system, changed the icons so it's not all Star Wars themed, but it still works, the same way: success, failure, threat, disadvantage, all that stuff. And there's a rule book that is just a generic version of it. It explains everything, and it even features a little chapter that's like, oh, here's a bunch of different campaign settings you can set it in. So if you want high fantasy, like Pathfinder or D&D, here's this little slice. Here's this little slice of sci-fi. Here's a slice of modern day and stuff. So the Genesis rules exist. Is it the most popular? No, I don't think so. I don't think anyone else really I've heard of
taken
has
a couple
actually
looks
played
at
it.
Genesis a couple times. I've been tempted to look into it.
Now you know, Cam, that it has a great dice system.
It does.
Yeah. You know what, Luis? I'm glad you're here because I love people who nerd out about tabletop. Like, I can just sit here, just listen to all the different kinds of games or what design elements or whatever. That's truly what TableTalk's about. I've been playing forever. I started, I think I started with Deadlands, technically original, before the Reloaded. And then I did GURPS for a while. GURPS is such a wild system. And then I've been playing like everything. I touched everything White Wolf has touched, and Anima Beyond Fantasy was a game I played for a really long time. I played a little bit of D&D 4E. I played a little bit of 3.5. I played a little bit of first edition Pathfinder. Is there any tabletop game or system you've particularly like, even if it's not your current favorite, that's really like been a big one for you?
I still love Star Wars. That one I'm holding on to. I keep playing that. I liked the New World of Darkness stuff, which is now Chronicles of Darkness. That was the first time I had encountered like a dice pool system, and I thought it was really neat. hey, take this stat, you get 3 points. Take this other skill, you get 2 points. Okay, that's 5 dice, easy. That was really interesting to me. I've always wanted to do more with Call of Cthulhu. The little bit
Ooh.
I've played is fun, and I think the percentile roll under thing is kind of interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that I still don't even know. Like I've dabbled very lightly in like Blades in the Dark and Forged in the Dark games and Powered by the Apocalypse games. It just there's so much out there, and I'm glad there is. Right? It just I happen to be on the, at least in my experience and history, on the crunchier side of things with Pathfinder and stuff. So.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Chronicles of Darkness, because back before D&D kind of monopolized like all the TTRPG parts of every store, World of Darkness used to have individual dice bags for each of their games. So you'd have werewolf dice, you'd have fey dice, whatever. I bought all of those. They were so fun. And so whenever we played, I'd always have bags to hand to people. We're like, all right, here's your dice, because they were always, I miss when stores used to do more stuff like that. And that's all like D&D paraphernalia, which is like, it's fine if you like D&D, but like I want more paraphernalia for like the smaller games. Give me more like World of Darkness, or give me more Chronicles of Darkness. So that's the one you've been playing recently, is the Fantasy Flight one. Is Pathfinder still your favorite over top, or?
Yeah, I think so. There's just something about it, right? Like, depending on what you consider my first RPG, right? I started with D&D 3.5, right? And the whole aspect of the kind of tactics and crunchy character creation, all that stuff, is still really, really interesting to me. And being here, not quite from like the first day of its inception, right? I was around when the playtest was being developed and stuff. That's when I joined. Before that was announced, but basically being there from its inception and kind of helping shape that has really like made me appreciate it and love it all the more. And knowing that like, oh, this particular thing happened, and that's thanks to me, right? Like, and just I can see my fingerprints on it in a way that makes me really proud of the game and really enjoy it. And then my friends who I play with just really like it. We love it. Between campaigns, we do try out other games. That's how I've managed to try out Call of Cthulhu and Star Wars and all these other games and learn from them as well. But no one has ever been like, actually, we should keep this Call of Cthulhu game going or anything. And I haven't had like the full like, oh, let's keep away from Pathfinder for a while. I was like, no, I think we love these diversions and trying all these other things out, but it's coming home, right? It's coming back to Pathfinder.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. We also actually alternate every season, so we're doing a live play every week. We're currently on like the last chapter of this campaign, and then we're gonna do Mutants and Masterminds for another one, and then I'm gonna try my own hand at running a homebrew for Pathfinder 2E called Plague Watch, which is gonna be a lot of fun. And now you guys have offered me so many more rules. I mean, I was already going to use the Dark Archive, like the monster, what's it called? Templates. Like the cool templates that you get added in that one. And now How of the Wild added some more. So now if I want to add in some other wacky monster kind of designs, that's going to be really cool.
I wrote the monster adjustments for Howl of the Wild, so if you end up adding a two-headed monster somewhere, have fun with it, right? I hope it works out for you.
Right, and if it kills any of us, we know who to thank.
Yes, of course. Those are less great. Like complicated and weird and stuff than the Dark Archive stuff, because it's just like, oh, here's fire themed or here's ice themed, but like,
you can have
two-headed one. Two-headed one, it would be fun.
And that reminds me, like, speaking of thank about monsters, it reminds us, like, last month we had James Case on as we interviewed, which he, of course, brought up how absolutely thankful he is that with your involvement in creating the Conspirator Dragon.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Which,
I love that guy.
Of course, he meant it a little differently. We mean it fully unironically. This is one of the coolest dragons we've ever seen.
No, I I
Conspirator
know
Dragon.
how James feels about the Conspirator Dragon.
Yeah.
He's reminded me several times, which means that, at least to me in my heart, like he may not love it, but it means I've done my job because he doesn't love it and he hates it and all that stuff. Like, oh, it's working as intended, right?
Yeah.
When you make something horrifying and there are people who reaction is disgust and horror, you've done it right. You've done it correct.
Absolutely.
I love it. It's my favorite dragon so far.
It's great. I set out to creep myself out with it, and I had a little bit of that here and there. So I'm like, oh well, if I'm creeped out, then I think it'll work well, right?
That's how you do it.
Yeah.
I think the best part about it is it's still a dragon, right? It's still
Mhm.
a almost hyper intelligent creature in a sense due to the age and everything. That mixed in with the innate flesh horror and almost monster like aspects creates such a dynamic character. No matter what Conspirator Dragon you add to your campaign, it's always going to be very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the name Conspirator Dragon, and then just the idea of like, squeeze into a skin suit and its bones breaks while it happens, right? Like it's, I don't know if any of you ever read Animorphs while that was a thing.
Yeah.
But the descriptions of like morphing are like bones are breaking, flesh is making gross noises, and all that stuff. I'm like, oh, what if that happened while a dragon was getting into that skin suit, right? Like it just, I'm like, that's disgusting. Let's go with it. Let's do
Perfect.
it. That's exactly what I want.
I adore how Animorphs can always be a great inspiration for horrific shape-shifting.
Yeah.
Like, because Animorphs is something I only recently, because I never read it as a kid because I saw the covers and I was like, oh, those look goofy and dumb. And I regret it because Child Me would have loved it.
Yeah.
Because, like, God, they look so great. But we had that in a campaign we did. One of our players played a shape-shifting, just taking on, like, shaman, taking on, like, monster parts and shape-shifting into them, taking inspiration from Animorphs for that exact same reason.
Yeah.
Because it's horrifying.
It is. And just the weirdness that comes with all that. I'm like, this is perfect for something to freak us out, right? Like I love these dragons, or I love the idea of dragons, but like, what more can we be doing with dragons? Can it just be more than something flying by, breathing fire? Turns out, yeah, you can start pushing this in a lot of interesting directions, and it was really satisfying, really rewarding to see people enjoy these dragons, because there was a lot of the time there when I was developing this and coming up with all these ideas and writing them and putting them in the book. And I'm just like, I really love these dragons, but do I just love these dragons because I've been working on them so long and I think they're great, and I become blinded by this? And it's like, no, people generally enjoy these. Okay, great. That means I did a great job, and everyone else gets to share in these dragons that I also like. So it's like, oh, now I have friends who also like the same thing I like.
Yeah. It's always the hurdle when you're designing something. I also adore the adamantine dragon, just absolute chunk.
A big chunky boy, yes.
I love the dragon design that's just wide. It's so fun. And then because it adheres to my personal bias, the diabolic dragon.
Oh, sure.
I love devil things in all forms and fashion, and so when I saw that was a thing, I got so excited.
Yeah. It's been a really interesting time with all those. It was just really fun to also work with our concept artist, Kent Hamilton, and just like do the back and forth. He would add stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's an interesting idea. The Conspirator Dragon has like the fake face on its head, which is inspired by a real world crab that looks like it has a man's face on it. The Hyakume, I think, is what it's called. But he did that. And no, Hikumi is a monster. What am I talking about? There's some crab in Japan that has a face. You can look it up later. But he added that, and I'm like, and he showed me the picture of this crab. I'm like, whoa, that's really weird. And then I immediately spent 5 minutes typing up the whole like quick disguise thing that Conspirator Dragons have, with the idea being, oh, they'll compress, they'll like turn their head and like put like a cloak on so it looks like there's a man, and then just use that to escape when they don't have time to build up a new skin suit, right? It's like they need something quick to escape. We have this fake face, and I guess kind of just magical evolution gave them this face that they can use to escape for whatever reason they might need.
The Hey Kagani crab.
Hikigami. There you go.
Thanks to Butter Voice.
There you go. Hikigami crabs. It's one of those quirks of nature where it happens to look like a face, and you just. I guess I'm sure that inspired so many stories back in the day when.
Yeah, well, Japan has a lot of, well, and a lot of Asian cultures have a lot of like human-faced creatures in their mythologies.
Yeah.
So
That's just humans noticing faces and things, you know.
Turtle, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, and this is all perfect because this leads perfectly into kind of what's been all going about War of the Immortals, where it's this big shift, and now we're talking about divinity in ways that we really haven't gotten to interact with before at this point in the series. I'm very curious if it's something you can talk about. What prompted y'all to do this big shift into like kill one of your core gods?
Before I get into much, I'm sure people will have questions on stuff, and there's definitely going to be things I will try to answer. But with PaizoCon being next week, I'm like going to be a little, keeping cards close to the chest a little bit. So don't
give
expect
them
me
an
to.
inch, please. They'll take a mile. Just,
Yeah, I don't expect every single question to get as much of an answer. So, but yeah, I think this was really Michael Sayer. He's the lead on the book. His idea is like, what if we did this and gave an explanation and a real interesting story to tell along with the rule books. We've been experimenting more with rule books over time. Something like Dark Archive, big departure in terms of how the narrative is being presented for that book, and stuff. Book of the Dead had that as well, where it was written in setting, or at least presented as an in setting book, written by Geb. So let's see what else we can do and find explanations for just an interesting shakeup, right? It's not like we were thinking, oh, Gorham's boring, let's just kill him off or whatever. It's just like, oh, what can we do? What kind of interesting stories can we do? Mike kind of took a leap of faith and was like, maybe we kill a god. And I think people are excited at the idea of doing it in a way that we knew would hopefully advance the story of Galarian and all of that, but not necessarily just be a gimmick, right? Which is the important thing, especially since I then came into the creative director role as this was kind of being put together. It's like, let's make sure that this is leading into an interesting development for the setting and isn't just shock value, right? It isn't just killing off a god for the sake of killing off a god. What interesting stories can develop from there? What can we use that for in terms of new developments in the setting? What does that mean mechanically, right? And it leads to things like exemplars being kind of sprouted out a lot more. It leads to interesting stuff going on in the setting that we haven't really teased too much of quite yet. But yeah, it was kind of an interesting chance to do a new thing, and why not, swing for the fences with it.
Yeah. Did you pick Gorham because he would make the best loot?
Gorham was. There were a couple of thoughts about who it might be, and we landed on Gorham because of just the interesting developments I think we could have. I'm sure you saw the little story blogs we were doing leading up. That's like, oh, who are we marking safe? Here's a little bit of fiction, the God's Ring prophecies. We wanted to make sure that, like I said, it wasn't just a one and done gimmick thing. What interesting stories can develop from this, and you'll be seeing more of this, and we'll be talking more about this in the coming months, and eventually you'll see in the book like what's going to happen with it. But like, Gorham led to a lot of interesting developments, or at least gave us a good explanation for these, right? It's not inherent that like, oh, obviously when you kill Gorham, X, Y, and Z is going to happen, but like, oh, Gorham is dead, and now X, Y, Z is happening, and it makes a lot of sense because Gorham died, and now this is this fallout. And I try to show off some of the potential ways stories like these could be told with a god getting killed off. I didn't. It was Aaron Roberts wrote the fiction, but I was the one that came up with those prompts initially, which started at Gen Con last year. people were asking me like, which god is it, right? They immediately wanted to know which
Right.
god it was.
Immediately.
And I'm like, I need to come up with an explanation if someone is like, oh, you're totally killing off Caden because it's X, Y, and Z, or you're killing off Pharasma because of this and that, right? And I need to throw people off the scent. I need to come up with red herring stories. Might as well come up with one for each of them. And if I'm coming up with these stories, I might as well make them ones that, like, if we were killing off these other gods, would have interesting developments. Came up with 20 of them. I had one for Gorham as well, just in case someone asked me about Gorham. And then those 20, we grabbed 10 of those and handed them off to Aaron to like flesh them out. Like, hey, if Pharasma dies, why does she die? How does she die? And what is the fallout? Like, well, she's tied to fate and prophecy. Prophecy hasn't worked in 100 years. Maybe what's happened is anything connected to prophecy is coming apart, and that includes her, and she's been just kind of slowly unraveling, and that leads to, her death, and all the things connected to her fall apart, and that includes like the psychopomps and everything, and that leads to that story that Aaron wrote. Interesting, cool, fun, I say.
It's fun.
But it leads to changes in the setting that lead to interesting stories, and hopefully a campaign setting that in some alternate universe where Pharasma was the one that we actually killed off is leading to interesting books and all this other stuff, and then happens again with Asmodeus and all this other stuff. So yeah, showing off what can happen when a god dies and the interesting developments to the campaign setting was really important to me, and I'm glad we got to do those God Reign prophecies to kind of prime people for the idea that, like, a god dying doesn't just immediately mean that their thing stops existing. It can go wrong. It can change in ways that you didn't expect. It can have someone else come in and fill that void in interesting ways. Just gods, because they have no stats, there's no rules on what happens when they die, and we can kind of tell any number of stories with them. And we want to make sure that people are ready for that kind of thing.
With that, and of course, if you're willing to answer,
Yeah.
Were there any god or gods that were being considered as like a serious runner-up, like death contender besides Room?
There were. I don't think it's going to be a problem if I share this at this point,
Okay.
right? Because people now know that Gorham is going to be the one to die. But there was a bit there when we were seriously considering Torag, right?
Yes!
Oh my god! We all had bets in our server of like who at the beginning was going to be right. Cam's been writing Torag for the entirety of this.
But
entire time.
This was so far back. Like High Helm was still like in writing. Like we were working on this quite a ways back. So there was a bit there. It's like, is it going to be Torag? We hadn't decided yet. So I'm like, here's what I'm going to do. In the High Helm book, I'm going to set up the potential of, like, if it is, some of the clues are kind of already scattered there. And if it's not, I know other plans we have for Torag, and these clues are going to apply in different ways, right? So I'm not going to tease much more than that, in that, like, Torag's story is going other places that happen to be set up. But, like, in High Helm, there is a bit there where it talks about, here's the Dwarven Pantheon. Technically, you can worship it with all 10 of the dwarves there, or dwarf gods that we've mentioned. That includes Torag and Droskar, who was evil. But a lot of people don't want to worship with Droskar in mind, so they worship these 9. Great. But sometimes people are like, hey, we don't want to include Torag. He's too important. He should be his own thing. These other 8 should be the Dwarven Pantheon, and it talks about how people care about that intentionally. I intentionally put that in there to seed the idea of, like, maybe if you worship the Dwarven Pantheon and you need to ignore Torag, there might be a reason for that, and people are already kind of used to that idea. The little teaser at the end of the book, the little hidden message, which you may or may not be aware is a thing that exists, in the credits, has like a little line from Torag's holy book that's like, hey, I'm Torag and you're great and I love you all, but you sometimes have to learn to not rely on me all the time. That was there just in case Torag did die, and he didn't die, but it was there to kind of set up this other idea, other stories that are going to be happening with dwarves and Torag and the Pantheon and stuff in the coming months that you'll learn about once the time of Divine Mysteries and War of Immortals rolls around. That something else is up with Torag, and it might lead to having to not rely on him in the same way, the way that was kind of teased in there.
Thank you for justifying my Torag choice so much. I can say I was close.
And like, of course, like you guys were planning right away, but like something came up. You guys were gonna kill off Nethys, right? Like that was a.
Oh no, nope.
Quick.
Nope, absolutely not. I don't want to pop that balloon and let magic go wrong. That's just too many problems.
See, I said it. I told you.
But it made for a great story. I had a great time teasing that in the Gathering Prophecies. But like magic going so wrong that like we have to change the mechanics of the game. It's a little more complicated.
It was quite a time when that released. Literally, because like the moment it was like our god's gonna die, I was just like, I'm gonna put my eggs in the basket of Nethys. I'm gonna double down on this. I'm gonna triple down. We had Michael Sayer on. Great time. We had a great like extra bit. A whole funny like haha session of like joking about which god is gonna die. Literally the day or so after the Nethys Godreign prophecy releases, and it felt a little spiteful. It felt like it was targeted at me, and people in our server adding me of like, you were wrong. I had to double down again because of course you do.
What's so funny is during that period, you know, people had their theories about, who is going to live, who's going to die, which one is the next prophecy, and all this other stuff. And people were connecting things that obviously we didn't create at all, right? Like people would take that picture of the 20 gods in the bingo kind of pattern and be like, oh, well, it's always like middle row, then next, and then next, and then this, and it's always this pattern, so it has to be this one of these gods next, or like you know, all this other stuff. And I added fuel to the fire by like on Twitter being like, oh, the god this week has a vowel in their name or whatever, right? Stuff like that. But we had planned the release order for these well in advance, right? We knew exactly we didn't change the order to spite anyone or to like try to route against, you know, theories or anything. It's just like, this is the order, and there's like a very minor pattern involved in that there was like always a group of three. It's like a good god and an evil god and a neutral god. You always do one of each, and then you do another batch of three, and then you do another batch of three, just to like make sure we distributed things kind of evenly. We didn't want to do all the evil gods at once or like all the good gods at once or whatever. But beyond that, like there was no pattern. There was no like secret messages we were trying to tease out or anything like that. But it was so fun to watch people really get into it.
I can imagine when you're holding a secret like that, watching people scramble every time you release a thing is great. And of course, logically, I do know like I know how like publishing stuff works. I also like in these interviews, we've gotten a lot of great insight in just how the logistics of it works. I know it wasn't targeted. The comedic timing of it, though, is more of what hits. It was perfect timing.
Paizo didn't spite small-time YouTuber Blue Boy on purpose? Unheard of.
Sometimes things just line up so perfectly, and I won't deny that Mike had no involvement in that, but you know.
Yeah. Ooh, so in chaos like always.
Oh, no.
And I will say, for many of the audience, I know you guys have tons of questions. You really, really want to get to them. We'll get to the questions somewhere in the last like half hour, maybe 45 minutes of the stream. There's some big questions I want to make sure that we get asked that I'm sure a lot of people are having. So, you know, and then we'll do our best at that point. So you gotta stick through to the end to get your question answered, maybe. So, it's always great. What I love about doing these kind of streams is a lot of people always are coming out excited to see, probably just more waiting for what scraps of any kind of information they can get. But, you know, I also want to give an opportunity to the wonderful creators at Paizo who made this game that, like, Paizo's been one of those companies that, I mean, I think they also just have the ability to do so more than a lot of like indie developers do, but to really connect with their audience and really get to like meet. I mean, I remember meeting you. We didn't like talk or anything, but we did kind of meet at PaizoCon, the last physical PaizoCon that we had.
It's
I believe
just always nice to meet the people, right? I was on the other side. I was a fan getting excited that I got to meet the people, and like it's just, I don't know, there's something about it that's just really always enjoyable to get to see people excited and talk with them about it and stuff.
Yeah, and plus you guys are such nerds too. Like I want people to understand that Paizo is a company that I feel like a lot of people can comfortably put their faith in, because the people on the other side, one, are big nerds and also really play their game, but two, are also people who really do care about the community and really work hard to make sure that they, the community gets heard, or at the very least you guys do stuff that you think the community will like.
Yeah, well, I appreciate all the faith that's coming in on that.
You guys have earned it. There's literally so many times I've made something myself for Homebrew, and then you guys release it like in a book within the year after I did it. I made undead companions for one of my characters, and then you guys released it like a year after I had set that up for the campaign, and that has happened no small amount of times. So I know at the very least you guys are in tune with what people want in your game, which is really cool.
And it's definitely not because we put secret listening devices in some of the books that we ship out.
Well, yeah. Well, I also stream, so it's like, oh no, you could be watching my streams. But not to be so vain, I'm pretty sure you guys are just,
I have been obviously jokingly accused of like sneaking into people's houses and listening to the exact things that they are about to, or their campaigns that they just finished, and then releasing a thing that they just wanted during that campaign a little too late, as if to spite them specifically.
Yeah, the timing of release stuff like that, it's happened to me in other games too. Like sometimes it hits and you're just like, that would have been so good if I had this a little earlier.
Yeah.
That does like Cam was saying, reminds me. It's something we've asked the others we've had on as well, and you brought it up too, with being a longtime Pathfinder fan, and also just the fun of seeing your work in a game you greatly enjoy. One of the parts I really like about Pathfinder is just how clear like the passion of the creators kind of like ebb through it.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you can look at in Pathfinder currently that you've worked on that you're like especially proud of, like your touch, be it as like big or as small?
Oh, absolutely. It's the Automaton Ancestry.
Yeah, that's such a good one. One of my favorites.
I really love robots, and I'm like, hey, there's a chance to. I have connections to the Automaton going back to first edition. So before I joined Paizo, I was doing freelance work for Paizo, doing writing for, player companions and campaign setting books and stuff like that. And there was once an offer to write for the Construct Handbook, which is one of the campaign setting books from 1E, and specifically write a new type of construct that were called automatons, and they're supposed to be something or other. I'm just like, okay, that sounds great. I want to write that. I want to write the new monster family that is these constructs. And things were worked out that like the art was already it was already in for those. So the look that you see of automatons was already decided by the artist. And I thought, this is great. These look awesome. I'm inspired. And I wrote all of those, wrote their entire history and like how they came to be and why they still exist and all this other stuff and all this intricate like lore that was kind of scattered between the various entries of the monsters. And that was great. And then the time came that Guns and Gears was getting made, and there were two things on that outline that it's like, I would love to do either of these. There was the chapter on Arcadia in the rotating guns section, and there was the Automaton Ancestry. And I said, I love Arcadia and everything, but this one's out. I need to do these robots. I need to do the Automaton. And while I was working on it, I thought, is there ever going to be an opportunity to add more automaton feats in the future? Ancestries, they're great, but sometimes it takes a while before another relevant book in terms of thematics comes up that would have an opportunity to feature more of this. How about I run this past the designers and see if they'll let me basically secretly double the number of feats that exist in this book with this extra things, which was the enhancement mechanic. Everything that is 13th level or lower ancestry feats has an extra little bit that's like, hey, you can upgrade this feat and it does more stuff, and each of those are basically a feat's worth of power as well. So each feat was basically 2 feats, and if we never touch automaton again, I will be satisfied knowing that I crammed in as much mechanical material in there as possible, and I'm very happy with them. A lot of people I've seen really enjoy them. I still think they're incredible. They just are among my favorite things that I've ever worked on.
That's honestly my favorite part about them is the enhancement part.
Yeah.
Actually, it's one of the parts I really like about the circuits that just got released as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. The automaton are very interesting, and their design visually is really good. They do feel automaton-esque, not just like robot people like androids can be, or not like over robot, which can happen in a lot of different kind of settings where
that's
they
what
seem
Starfinder's for.
Yeah. These definitely felt very intentionally designed to be the way they are, and I think that was very, very, very well done.
They felt like like robots that like automatons that slot perfectly into a fantasy setting.
They're Magitech is what they are.
Yeah, perfect, like Magitech. And I'm somebody that is a through and through like sci-fi nerd. My preferred kind of settings are sci-fi.
Sure.
And I do enjoy a lot of fantasy stuff, but my favorite like forms of fantasy is fantasy with like something a bit weird kind of hidden in the back somewhere. Pathfinder does it a lot too. It's like also the elements where you see it in like Elder Scrolls, where you're like, Elder Scrolls, your typical high fantasy. Oh yeah, and then there's the Terminator guy that exists in Elder Scrolls lore if you dig around.
Wow.
Definite time traveling robot that was the thing and he was going around. He lived for like 300 years. It's a full-on actual thing. It's great fun when they show up, and then some settings try to hit it and they don't hit it perfectly. And the automatons are so fun because they slot in perfectly and they feel like they fit.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that it worked out. That's the kind of thing I was shooting for, right? Like, oh, how can robots exist in this fantasy without being just flat out sci-fi? And, it turns out you just say they're magic. And that works out for most of it.
That's the difference between sci-fi and fantasy. It's just in sci-fi you have to use made-up words to explain the tech, and then for fantasy you just magic.
Yep.
You shrug, and then it's kind of done.
Yeah.
I really like the mage automaton especially. I like the idea of magic being used by machines in a more traditional sense rather than just as a power source. It's something you don't see a lot, and it's something that blends the two, I think, better together in my eyes.
Yeah.
But on top of all this, you've touched some really great things so far, and many of us are very, very excited about War of Immortals. I know I am, especially, even though I learned recently that D&D 2024 is coming out literally in September. So literally it's August, September, October, November of just big game releases from the top tabletop games, which like I'm happy for, right? My channel gets to grow from this, but at the same time, man, I'm so tired already. But that being the case, is there any book or project you worked on specifically that you feel is like your crown jewel, the project that you were really the most excited to be writing about?
Oh yeah, it's definitely Divine Mysteries, right? Divine Mysteries started life before the remaster changed, right? Before the remaster was anything we've even considered, right? And the initial plan was just like, oh, let's just make Gods and Magic 2, right? We like that book. Can we find an interesting angle for it to... I mean, we can justify any book, right? But like, personally to me, what makes it most interesting as a book, and what makes the most interesting project to work on. Right, the thing about passion was brought up earlier. Like, yeah, if you are not excited for the book you're working on, it's going to show, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the other side of the coin, if you are excited for the book, it does show. And that's the thing I've noticed hiring the authors that we do. When they are excited about their particular sections or the material they're working on, we get incredible work, and it's always fun. Grand Bazaar is one of those books that, like, everyone was just super excited about everything they did, and I think it shines on the page.
I agree.
But Divine Mysteries was that for me. Okay, well, we can just do 100 new gods and another chart and all this other stuff, but that's fine. That works. Is that as interesting to me? No, let's explore what makes a god. What is all this? How does this work, right? And that's when I came up with the idea for Yavali, the psychopump. You know, her right here.
So fun.
It's great.
And, you know, we had these in-setting narrators. Let's do another one. But what if it's someone that is learning the ins and outs of how divinity works? Okay, who could do that? Yavali makes a lot of sense. And why is she doing this? You know, why is she studying this? Oh, it's a research paper. It's her grad school thesis. And it went from there, right? And developing her personality of being kind of a big nerd for this kind of thing, being excitable, being into this kind of thing, which Erin did wonderful in terms of making that come across her in her writing for the Godscreen Prophecies. And then that also just gave me an excuse to kind of grab the groupings of gods that we were planning to do. Like, we hadn't presented the orc gods yet. Okay, why would Yavali be interested in researching them? Oh, they have the interesting thing. They have the crucible where if you die, there's a chance that you can go challenge a god in the afterlife and become a new god. Okay, that's an interesting dynamic in terms of divinity. Let's explore that. What's up with the goblin gods? You know, they have the whole thing with the Barghest goblin gods that, you know, that dynamic is interesting. Let's explore that. We have older ancient gods like the Aslanti pantheon. They were interesting because they used to be more prominent. Now they're not. Let's explore what's that. And that was just my framing device excuse for, like, okay, well, we want to present the Aslanti pantheon and the orc pantheon and the goblin pantheon. Okay, but it turns out we can find an interesting angle from which to approach these. And then the remaster happens, and suddenly we're like, okay, well, this is next in line after the Tianxia books, but we're in a weird spot where all these gods from earlier in the edition won't be updated to the remastered rules. Obviously, the core deities are going to be just fine. They're going to show up in player core. But what about the gods from the Manga Expanse book? What about other gods from Gods and Magic that we had presented and didn't update? We had a talk, and we're like, maybe we just grab all of those as well. And that turned into this enormous book that we have now. We got to do everything. I made sure to track down every last stat block I could and try to get that updated or referenced in some way. Just because, I mean, when are we going to do another Gods book? At least not for several years, right? If we decide to do another one. But we don't want to leave these people behind, right? That, hey, I was worshiping Balumdar, the god of things that are big from the Mongi Expanse. I don't know if he can choose holy or should be none, or, you know, what his new spell should be and all that other stuff. So I tried my best to grab as much as I could, update the all the domains, including domains that were published elsewhere, like in Back Matter and stuff like that, AP Back Matter. Just update as much as I can and make this as comprehensive as possible, because I know if I were a player, I would be kind of bummed out if, oh, there's all these new gods, but hey, where's Balumdar? What do I do with that? The things I want as a player are things I want to give people as a creator, right? I want to make sure these people have the tools in their hands that I would want as a player, and that's just kind of been my mentality for a lot of things. Like, what kind of cool player options would I want? Great, that's what I would want if I were playing. I'm going to put those in the books, and it generally turns out to be along the lines of what other people are thinking as well. So
Yeah.
I would say Divine Mysteries, the one I'm most proud of, most excited. Obviously, the one I had the biggest hand in, but I think it's just doing a lot of cool stuff.
Yeah, that's super fair. That sounds like a giant undertaking.
It is.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
But you know, man, leave it to Paizo. One, to say the most respectable stuff you can get on the internet. Just like, if I was a player, I'd want all this stuff, so I went and I scraped everything we could to make this book good. But also, man, ever since I've learned of Divine Mysteries, I've been like, man, I really want to know it in this book. And leave it to another Paizo creator to be like, yeah, I'm really excited for this new book coming out. I'm like, I really want to know what's in Divine Mysteries now. Because I also really liked Gods and Magic. It's probably one of my favorite books beforehand, just because I find like learning about a lot of the other, especially like deities from like the First World and the other kinds of planes as well, is always super fascinating. And man, and then I keep seeing hints of Divine Mysteries in all the books I've been releasing, like, oh hey, these domains that are you know, might get changed in Divine Mysteries. And it's like, I keep getting reminded of this book that it's not coming out till November.
Tell me about it. It's been we've known about it for a long time, and it's been good, and it will be worth it once it's fully out. But there are times where it's like, I guess we're going to be pointing forward to Divine Mysteries, and we just have to hope people are willing to hold out until that happens. If you look in GM Core, actually, that was the first name drop for Divine Mysteries. In the little section about the gods, it's like, oh, blah blah blah, blah, here's the gods of the Inner Sea. More information about gods can be found in Lost Omens Divine Mysteries, and that's what it says. And because of that, we needed to make sure people, one, knew that the book existed before someone read that in the GM Core and then like accidentally leaked it or whatever. So we wanted to make sure we had the announcement. So we announced it when we did, but it also meant that like we announced it probably a little earlier than we're used to for other books. But it also means that we got to kind of talk about it alongside War of Immortals in a way that was actually probably for the best. Hey, War of Immortals is happening, and Lost Omens is already doing a thing that's tying into that, and we get to kind of walk hand in hand as we share more as time goes on.
It makes a lot of sense for them to be announced and discussed like side by side like that.
Yeah.
So it does make sense. The long wait hurts only because we want it, but then it works.
It's been hurting the authors for quite a while because they've just been sitting on like, I know I worked on this book, but I can't talk about it even existing quite yet. So I was glad to finally get that announcement out and make sure that the author list was out immediately so they could have, at the very least, like stop holding their breath and announce it like, oh yes, I worked on it too. I got to do this thing.
And it's a breath of fresh air. Just like the relief of being able to announce like, I did a cool thing. Look at it. It's very cool. And I'm super excited because like almost in the other direction of Cam here. Well, he covers a lot more of the rules. I'm starting out covering Pathfinder lore.
Sure.
So now whenever a Lost Omen book comes out, I'm like, ooh, I gotta get my hands on that. Yeah. And I'm so pumped for it because like whenever I read about the gods, I'm like, this is such a cool character. I want to really gush about them. And then it's like, oh, there's gonna be a book where it's going more in detail and like giving just a lot more information about like a lot more of the more obscure ones. Like perfect situation. And they're always just a fun read as well. So I like having them.
That's great. I'm glad that's what like ultimately what we set out to do is like, even if you don't get a chance to play with these options or care about these options, that you've enjoyed reading the book, then we've done our job.
Yeah. I like that each one has a different like framing device almost. That's a good way to keep hooked, I think. That's the bit that's been pulling me as someone who doesn't like reading that much. Like having a physical book and like just sitting down with it. Having like each book be carried by a different style and theme, I think is what makes it really interesting.
Yeah.
Alex, were you planning on going over the novel that's coming out soon?
I will have to see. The only reason I hesitate is I don't want to spoil a novel or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would definitely announce that it's happening. And if this comes out with an audiobook, I will definitely grab it when it comes out, only
It
because
it
time
is
wise.
it is having an audiobook. Yeah, we've announced
Perfect.
that it's coming in ebook and audiobook form as well. So
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see but that is great news. Because the best chance for me to like read books, not even just like I said, I'm not good with it, but also like the most solid chunk I have is at work where
yeah,
I just get to use headphones. Like 8 hours at work just listening to this book, I will definitely be listening to it.
for sure.
All right. And actually, now that we talked about many of the wonderful projects you got in your hands on, what you're proud of, and all that kinds of stuff, and I'm hopefully some of the audience as well are curious. Like, as creative director, I have
Yeah.
dyslexia. All the words get mixed in my head all the time.
You're fine.
What do you do? Like, what is your job? Can you give us like a brief primer on what it is
Yeah.
to be in your shoes?
Yeah, it's a lot of interesting things, right? I am shepherding. Let me give you an example of one thing I did very early on, which is like the type of minutia that I get to work with. One day, I think it was James Case actually, came to me and it's like, hey, art has been kind of inconsistent on centaurs. I think the reason is because of Howl of the Wild art orders he was doing. Do centaurs have pointy ears like an elf, or do they have rounded ears like a human? And I'm like, okay, I guess it's up to me to decide, right? To make the final call on this. That's general lore purview. And I figured I'm gonna look at our previous artwork just to see what had happened. Turns out a lot of our centaur art is them wearing helmets, which is not helpful at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot. There was a fair amount that were pointy, not like quite as long as an elf, more like half elf pointy ears. Some had pointy ears, some had rounded ears, and there didn't seem to be like a, oh well, there was just like one pointy ear guy and the rest were rounded ears or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Seemed pretty balanced between the two, and it's like, well, I guess I get to make the final call. Let's just go with rounded ears, if only because it's one less detail that an artist has to keep track of, right? They're already designing a centaur and all the problems and stuff that come with a centaur. Um, if they have to then remember, oh, you got to give them pointy ears, that's just one extra thing on their workload, right? So we went with rounded ears, and that's what they are going to be doing forward. Going forward is rounded ears. But that's some of the things I get to deal with is figuring out, making final decisions on what should be happening with the setting, right? What is kind of things we want to be doing. Kobolds, the upcoming changes to kobolds is a thing that we worked on, and I got to kind of I didn't necessarily spearhead them, like I didn't write them myself, but I was definitely involved with like making those final decisions of, oh well, to pull them back from dragons, but still allow them to be connected to dragons because they are connected to sources of magical power now. So they might be primal kobolds that are connected to a nymph or a dryad or something, and now in a kobold that maybe has a conspirator dragon as a thing they hang out with, or they just hang out in a weird area with weird magic and stuff. But like that's the kind of things I'm doing. I'm also obviously doing development work, which is leading books and being in charge of that. But I also speak with licensors and other brands about things that should be happening with the setting or how they should be representing the game in their other products. There was the Gallowspire video game that came out a little while back, and because of the remaster stuff, I had to get them a list of like, here are the spell names that you'll want to change, because they were trying to use existing spell names for like their abilities and stuff that you could do. Here's the spell names. Here's how there's no more potion of dragon's breath. Now it's called this, and here's what these feats have been renamed, and getting them up to date on that. Making sure that things align with how we want to represent the brand and the setting. So I'm doing a lot of stuff, and sometimes I'm telling people we should have our, what's an example of this? we should have something like hags, right, in the monster core. I
Mhm.
didn't have a mandate of we should do our hags this, and this, but it was Eleanor who wrote these coming back to me. It's like, hey, I think here's what I want to do. I'm like, great, that sounds perfect. Let's go ahead with that. Or, oh no, we should tweak this or that. But otherwise, I think the idea is great. And working with the people that I am creative director, but I don't want to be creative tyrant, right? I don't want to
Mhm.
say like it's all my setting and I'm in charge and you have to do exactly what's. No, we're working together. This is collaborating. That's what Pathfinder is, right? You're collaborating to tell a story. I am here to make final calls or tell you like, hey, that's not going to work, but we can do this or that. In a lot of cases, I trust the people I work with. I work with some of the best minds ever, right? Creative minds in any
Mhm.
industry, and they know what they're doing, and it's just run it past me. And if you're worried about it, like conflicting, or you have any questions about how does it line up with the lore, we'll work together. But let's just keep making stuff by collaborating.
Which is good because honestly, I love the sweet hag, even though they're horrifying.
Yeah.
Love the taffy-esque skin and body
hmm
and gumdrop eyes. It's great to think of a monster like that. This kind of leads, I guess, to the question, which you somewhat answered, but we'll get something more definitive. How much power, how much weight is in your hands when it comes what comes into Pathfinder, like narratively speaking?
Um, I think more than I've been realizing.
Yeah.
There's,
Hmm.
I think I've realized more and more. It's like, oh, I actually have a lot of weight I can throw around if I wanted to. I'm just not the kind of guy that like generally does so. But I have gone into outlines and said, hey, make sure to include this specific thing. This is a thing I would like to see in the setting or in the game or whatever. Um, and that's about it. Like that's about as much as I wield in terms of am wanting to wield, right? Um,
Hmm.
there are ideas I have that I'm like, oh, we should be doing this or that. Things like there are a lot of times where I'm just like, guys, I want to do this, and people are like, oh yeah, that sounds fine. We go ahead with it. Um, like one thing that comes to mind is related back to dragons is squishing the age categories down so we don't have like 12 of them. We have a lot fewer, and it's just a lot easier to keep track. Because what's the difference between young and young adult dragon, right? Like,
Yeah.
do we
Yeah.
really need to get that
Or
granular? It made
fledgling, or yeah.
it made sense back when the stats were based on that to the degree that they were in the first edition rules and back to third edition where it's like, oh, when they go from this category to this category, you add +2 AC, and their DCs go up by this much, and it was that granular. It's like that's not the game we show anymore. That's not the game that we have anymore. I think it's easier if we just have these 5 or 6 categories and just go from there. And people are like, oh yeah, okay, great, makes sense. Let's keep going, right? So yeah, I'm sure there will reach a point where I'm like, no, I got to put my foot down. We can't do this. But so far, again, I trust the people I work with, and nothing has come up so far that's been like, absolutely not. We are never going to do that, right? Um, there are definitely times where I'm like, maybe here's a different direction we want to take this, or I don't want to ever shut down people entirely, but I definitely recognize like, hey, if I let you just continue on this course, it's going to lead us into directions that I don't think we should be heading. Let's course correct now, so I don't have to then later come down and be like, actually, I have to take your toys away. You've done wrong. Let's change it entirely, right? I have the opportunity where, because I work with the rules, the rule books so far in advance, I can catch these things well in advance and never have to worry about, oh, actually, we have to cut this entire thing or kind of ruin someone's, project, and or at the very least, making the upsetting choice of having to take something away from them after working so hard on it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what a director should be, is a
Yeah,
director, not not a micromanager.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I don't want to micromanage. It sounds like
yeah,
so much work.
It's extra
honestly.
effort. Yeah, that's a good way of going about it. It's actually something that I my educational background, I've done filmmaking. Like I've directed and took part in just a lot of projects. And so when you have like a really strong like collaborative art form, like with that's how you're running things, like
Yeah.
that's the good way of going about it, is making sure like ideas are shot down when you have to, it's done healthily and in the way of like, let's not get too off track for such and such reasons. Let's make sure everything's on board. Because then you can see some projects that something does go a little too far and then something has to be taken away. And then it's like, well, I spent a week working on this thing. That feels a little bad.
Yeah.
So yeah, it also is good to have a team that you can trust, like in
Yeah.
a project like that. It's very good. It's very healthy for the game.
Another question that I think will tie into a lot of the types of questions people are currently asking. As creative director, how tied in are you to like the mechanics and what goes into the actual game design?
I get to see it every step of the way. Am I like coming in and being like, no, this feat should do that instead of this? No, that's why we have a lead designer. I trust Logan Bonner, our lead designer, to come by and explain what, maybe we don't go this way mechanically, right? Something like a class, right? Like the exemplar. I obviously didn't have specific mandates of like, okay, at level 4 they should be doing this, and at level 10 they should be doing that. I don't even if I knew the game better. Not that I say that I don't, but like even if I knew like perfectly, I'm like I would not care so much about that, right? That's just going to be stifling in such a way that like we're not going to get the best work out of whoever's working on the class or whatever mechanics, right? But making sure that like, oh, does the exemplar make sense in the setting? What kind of stories do we want the exemplar to tell? Great, let's work on that, right? James Case, who designed the exemplar, would come back to me sometimes and be like, hey, do you have examples of in-setting characters that can serve as inspiration for exemplar abilities and stuff, right? Like who are mythical figures, legendary figures that might lead to cool stories, or we can reference in setting so people have like those touchstones. And yeah, doing that, I love doing that, and I get to just kind of be along the way. I read the Guardian and Commander playtest before it was finalized, and I had some questions for like, hey Mike, is this supposed to work this particular way or whatever? And there was a couple of things that having that extra set of eyes does, but like it's not ever to the point where I'm like jumping in and tearing it apart and being like, this needs to be that or whatever. We do a lot of discussion in advance before any writing even happens, before any of the mechanics start getting fleshed out. And it's in those meetings and stuff that I'm talking and really hoping to offer the insight and the direction of where things should be going. Because again, I don't want to have to micromanage. It's just not going to be worth all that trouble later on. But also just, if I've done the work correctly, I can just trust these people to get it done. And look, there you go. Now we have a cool class. And now we have an exemplar. Now we have a guardian. Now we have, stuff like that. And just, can I ever peek in at any given time and see how the class is coming together or a given mechanic is coming together? Yeah, sure. Do I do that sometimes? Yeah, but not with the intent to come back and be like, oh, you need to change this and fix it. It's more just to be like, oh, I wonder how it's going. I'm interested in how it's coming together, right? And also to kind of understand what to expect. If I understand how the commander works, it's better to know how the commander works in advance. It's my job to know how the commander works in advance so I can accommodate its place in the setting and know, hey, if we're doing this Lost Omens book later, can we be tying back to the commander in a particular way? Yes, because I know how the tactics work, right? And I can jump in on that in advance. This is not any promise that there's already commander stuff coming down the line from Lost Omens, but that's just a kind of example of the kind of things that we can have working, because I get to watch every step of the process and be like, oh, actually, I just saw this new feat here and this other thing. We can grab that as an example for something else, or we can tie into this thing, or here's this new part of the setting that will be perfect to add, a bunch of exemplar stuff to, or whatever. So Yeah, in terms of the rules and mechanics, I know the game pretty well. I have to write for it all the time. I've written, you know, the Automaton. I've written a lot of class material over the years. I think I know it pretty well, but I also know that I have lots of people on this team that know much better, and I can always consult, and they can help me with any questions I have to make sure I can do my job better as well.
I sympathize with that so well, but in a much more, I don't have a choice because what I do is I review material. I look at
Hmm.
what you guys do, and I take my many years of doing tabletop stuff and my general like expertise in tabletop and try to like
Yeah,
convey it so that people understand. Though all the people who correct me on the rules or get the things I miss, they yell at they yell. I mean, the comments are like, "How'd you
sure.
not seize this?" So like I get the feeling for sure. The mine's much less voluntary, or I guess as pleasant, but still that's very interesting. It's titles and companies are always one of those things that never really relate to a specific job more than just the company's interpretation of a job. A creative
Yeah.
director at one company is going to be different than a creative director at another company. So I think it's really important for people to kind of understand, especially because I see a lot of questions here. I'm just like, I don't know if Luis will have even an answer for that. I don't know. That
The thing is, I might know the answer. Will I tell you the answer? That's another question
well,
entirely.
yeah.
It's a harder
Well,
question too, because like the other bit is working around because we don't want to also put you on the spot
Sure.
too
No,
much.
I know where the lines are and stuff. I'm happy to answer when I can. So feel free to ask whatever question, and if I like, I probably shouldn't answer that question, I will tell people. I'm sorry. Or there might be a thing where it's like, actually, you're gonna learn about this in a week at PaizoCon, right? Stuff like
Which is
that, and I want to keep those secrets a little. Make sure that those land with the impact that we want them to. We want to keep those secrets juicy a little longer.
we got to keep the PaizoCon hype. We can't break
Yeah,
that.
for sure.
yeah, but I mean, it's also important because we'll try to screen as best as we can, just because we don't have the most time. So we want to make sure that what questions
Fine.
we have are
I'm
impactful.
doing so the PaizoCon server, Discord server. If
Mhm.
you've been to them in the past, they have an AMA section. I'll be
Yeah.
there as well to answer whatever, right? And I
Yeah,
also say there like, hey, I may not be able to answer everything, but feel free to just throw whatever question you want at me.
that would be a good link. We might grab that for our community. When is PaizoCon exactly?
PaizoCon is next weekend.
Next
Starts
weekend.
next Friday. Yeah, Friday the what is that? The 24th. Yeah, 24th through the 26th. If you go to, can you go to paizocon.com? I wonder if we can do that.
I
And
at
it might,
least have a link with the on Paizo's website of
yes.
all the nice information.
Typing
And
paizocon.com takes you to our site, and it gives you all the information, including the Discord link for the event server, where you can find, sign up for games and find the AMAs and stuff. Obviously no one is going to answer your question now because
Yeah.
PaizoCon's not happening, but you can be ready for next weekend.
And actually, this is I just thinking this is a really good opportunity to get this kind of information out for our audience.
Hmm.
So, PaizoCon has been moved to digital. What does that
Yeah.
mean? Do you need like money to get in? What's like the deal with PaizoCon?
So what used to happen, PaizoCon was in person. You
Mm-hmm.
had to buy a ticket, and then if you didn't live in the area, you had to find your way to get out to PaizoCon. And a lot of people did, and that was great. We recognized, though, especially with everything with COVID, that like, oh, it becomes inaccessible to a lot of people, right? If you didn't have the money for a ticket or the money to fly out, let's say you live far away, different part of the country or even different continent entirely, making it out to PaizoCon isn't necessarily reality, which is just the truth of cons. But hey,
Yeah.
can we open it up to more people? Sure. Turns out doing it online, we kind of grown used to that. Let's just keep that going. Any panels, any information you want to learn about PaizoCon, those are free to watch. Those are going to be part of our Twitch streams. You can join the Discord server for free. There's no ticket to come and enjoy what is being presented at PaizoCon. You pay money to get into games. There are online games being run, and if you want to be part of that, there's a ticket you pay for that. But otherwise, if you want to come by, ask us questions, listen to the panels, be part of the community, and chat with each other, and excited about all things, Paizo. We have set it up as, at least to the best of our knowledge, as easy as we can make it for everyone to join in. There's no sign up fee or anything like that. Come by, enjoy, and we look forward to everyone that gets a chance to do that.
And Easy Does It says you also need to pay a ticket to ask questions in the Q&As.
There you go.
True?
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know for sure. I knew for sure with the games, but that might be different. I haven't kept track of exactly the thing, but the panels at the very least, always free. Just come by and watch.
Okay. I need to hop into the creator channel and see what needs to happen for like co-streaming and stuff like that, because that'd be fun to do with the audience, of course, and have all our community members kind of get together, see all the new fun stuff for some of the big announcements. All right, so we have I think I've asked, is there any questions you want to ask, Alex, before we kind of open things up?
I've asked my major ones, and I think you're also I'm looking at the chat. I've been keeping an eye on some of the questions. I think there's like a lot and some pretty fun ones that we could go through.
Yeah,
honestly,
the audience has learned that now they just shout questions the whole stream. Eventually we'll get to it, maybe.
We'll double back.
We try to, but for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay. Look, we'll go ahead and open up for the chat to ask any questions. Let's see if I can find while people are typing.
I think this is the first time I've had any kind of interview since we've announced who's dying. So it's really interesting to like be in this mindset. It's like, no, I can talk about Gorham dying finally.
After like so long of having to like be cagey about it, keep it on wraps. It is a hard adjustment, I can imagine.
We kept it secret from the freelancers writing on Divine Mysteries. Right?
Oh wow.
In the outline, right, we designate like which section is being written by who. So like, oh, this guy is written by so and so. In the outline, I assigned to Gorham. I put Gorham into the outline first and foremost, so it looked like he was still part of it, and I assigned it to myself. So it's like, oh, I'm already going to be writing Gorham. No one else has to worry about it. And there were a couple of others that were written by other Paizo staffers that happened to be writing on the book. So like, there was still like a little bit of question of like who's doing what. But yeah, there was only one person on that book that actually knew Gorham was dying, because I had to tell her like, hey, you're writing the Erasni section, and it's important for you to know that like the reason this is happening is because Gorham is dying. So it's been nice to finally be free to tell the people, yes, it's Gorham. Is there more involved with that? Yes, but I can at least say it's Gorham.
Yeah, we learned that Torag has some work to do still, so that's gonna be
interesting
as well.
Torag's got something going on.
Groovy Sage asks if we can get a little glimpse into the development philosophy of Paizo. Is there a reason why new archetypes don't get the same playtest space the way new classes do?
A fair amount of the archetype work is stuff we've already learned how to do with classes, right? So something like the Sentinel archetype, right? That's all about heavy armor. We know how to design feats for heavy armor because we've done it already with the champion. We've done it with some of the other mechanics that exist in that. We know how to build off of that. And generally, an archetype doesn't have a significantly new mechanic that you've never seen anywhere else before. Something like tactics from the commander, for example, or the way that the icons worked for the exemplar are so new that we want to make sure these are working in a particular way. And frankly, the classes are the thing that a player will be most likely to interface directly, right? At level 1, you take a class, you don't take an archetype. There are some exceptions there, right?
Most times, yeah.
But like, you're not taking the martial archetype, you're not taking acrobat at level 1, and as a result, we want to make sure these are just put through their paces the most, more than anything else. And the other thing is, frankly, we would not have enough time to put out books if we are playtesting every single archetype that's ever going to show up into a book, right? We would have to go through that whole process, or at the very least, we wouldn't be able to put out as much as we do, right? Like, if we were playtesting every archetype, something like the APG having dozens of archetypes would not have happened. We would have maybe had like 5 or 6 at most, because it's like, well, I guess we're playtesting. We don't have time to write all these other ones and playtest them and develop them and all that stuff. So we feel pretty confident in the design work that we do, and we feel that it's easy to translate that into an archetype. We don't playtest every single new fighter feat, for example, right? Because we know the parameters, we understand what the class is supposed to be, we know where the boundaries are, where the lines are for this, and same thing, we don't playtest every new spell or whatever. We know the design, we know it in and out, and we feel confident that what we're putting out is going to be solid and work with the game the way we want it to.
Okay, sounds good. I mean, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I have tried making videos on all the archetypes, and I'm still not done. There's so many archetypes. And then you release them in APs.
If you did one a week, it would have taken you a whole year just to do the APG, right?
Yeah.
Just I recognize there's a lot. Yeah, so
that's a lot. Another question. I just moved off screen here. This one was by Anthony Peterson. Says, what kind of lore books are you planning for the next couple of years?
Well, I can't talk about them because they're not announced. But the thing is, I think a safe bet is that we're going to do region books, right? We've been doing Wongi Expanse, we've been doing Impossible Lands, Tianxia. So taking deep dives into regions are always going to be good chances to. It's just a good bet, good safe bet for Lost Omens books. I think in the future, I don't really have much more to say beyond that. Just expect that we're going to be doing our best to, make these books that we're passionate about again, right? I don't want to put a Lost Omens book on a schedule unless someone who's leading that book is excited about the book, right? The thing with Grand Bazaar is an example that comes to mind for me. It's like the idea was, let's do an equipment book. Okay, well, personally, that wasn't immediately as exciting, right? Like, oh, we can just do a bunch of charts and all these equipment. That doesn't feel very Lost Omens. That's not very, lore and setting and stuff. How can we make this interesting? And then I landed on the idea, what if we take you shopping? What if we're walking you past windows and you see that magic armor in the window or that magic sword on the display or whatever, and then you get excited and then you want to go into that shop the way real world shopping happens, right? That developed into the idea of, let's present different shops, and the shops have different things that they show off to encourage you to flip through the book and not just jump to, oh, here's where all the magic weapons are. That's the only thing I care about. You have to go shopping. You have to go find the thing. So here's the shop, and it has one magic weapon. Here has 2 magic runes, and over here has another magic weapon, and it spread it out. And then that led to the idea of, let's talk about these shopkeepers. Let's talk about the NPCs tied to them. I know I've run into times when it's like, what's the shopkeep's name? I don't know. Well, luckily I have a shopkeeper ready to go here for you in this book now. And they happen to be a blacksmith, right? Great. I have a ready-to-use blacksmith. And that suddenly turned into a book that was a lot more interesting to me. And, writing this outline, that translates to an outline that people are excited to write for. Everyone is excited to write for this book. And it turns into what I think is, among one of my favorite books in the Lost Omens line. So what books are coming in the future? I can't say for sure, but books that, best as I know, people are still excited to be working on. So hopefully that'll translate to books that people are excited to read and play with when the time comes.
Good answer. Good answer.
I'm certainly excited to read like all of them when they come out. So.
I love what you talked about with the Grand Bazaar too, because that's immersive narrative stuff. That's
Yeah.
something that I think a lot of TTRPG books don't add enough of in their books, which makes it really hard to feel like you're in the setting because you don't know how the setting should feel like in person. You just know the overall mechanical lore. So that's great to hear. I love hearing stuff like that. Mr. Nana111 asks, can you share any information on Blood Rager?
No, I can't. That's definitely Mike Sayer's purview. Since it's in the War of Immortals rulebook, I worked on some of that book, and I'm willing to talk about the things that I worked on in that book. But I'd rather let Mike be able to tease out the stuff he wants to in that book. So I know the word Blood Rager is. I'm pretty sure it's being uttered in one of the panels next week. So look for it there at the very least.
You heard it here first, folks. Luis says, come watch my stream during PaizoCon. You might hear about Blood Rager.
You might hear the word Blood Rager.
The word Blood Rager was spoken. Everyone pog in chat. I guess just to make sure, because I feel like now we brought that up, it'll get brought up. Can you talk about the archetypes at all in Divine Mysteries?
I'll talk a little bit about them. We've teased 3 archetypes so far. 2 of them are class archetypes. One is a generic basic. I don't know if we have a term for. We'll call it a general archetype, right?
Yeah, general.
So one is the for the cleric is the battle harbinger, and it's, do you want to do more combat stuff? Okay, you will have to pay the price that comes with a class archetype exchanging things out. Your spell casting is going to be diminished a bit, and your font is going to change significantly, but you're going to get a lot of cool stuff to take you into combat and encourage frontlining and or at the very least getting more engaged directly rather than just I'll cast some buffs or I'll whatever, right? And it's, I think, really interesting. It leads to a lot of interesting design, and it meant that because we were making the class archetype, we weren't beholden to the kind of very small wiggle room that a doctrine has. Doctrines do give you a lot of stuff, but ultimately, like, there's actually not that much give in a doctrine when you actually break it down. So okay, well, we want to do more with the cleric. We want to offer more kind of battle-y options. We have class archetypes. We have that technology. Let's mess with it, and I think it landed in a really interesting and exciting place. We'll see what people think of that, and get excited for their battle auras is what we call them.
Yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard nonstop people wanting battle clerics and not getting master proficiency.
I think a lot of the time, I think the War Priest still handles it pretty well. But
yeah, I agree.
I'm excited for people to check this out.
War Priest is great, but I do want a little bit more war in my priest. You know.
Sure, that makes sense.
A little bit more.
I thought War Priest was perfect. I thought Alchemist was fine perfectly before everyone started complaining about Alchemist, but. We'll see what new Alchemist stuff comes up in Remaster Player Core 2. I'm
curious to do that.
Asks, directed very much at you. Question, when I first spoke with you, it was about Apsu and his mechanics well before Gods and Magic came out, and it's something that stuck with me for several years now. Is there any lore drops or changes to Apsu or Dahak you wanted to reveal now, especially considering all the changes to dragons in general?
Sure. People have been asking me about, hey, are Apsu and Dahak even still around, right? And I've said elsewhere, but I can say again here that they are getting entries in Divine Mysteries, right? So they're still around. Their story has changed, right? It is a retcon. We're changing the lore behind them a bit, but I think it opens up to more possibilities in the future. Not necessarily just with Apsu and Dahak, but you'll learn that in the backstory, turns out Dahak has siblings, right? There are more dragon gods out there, so we're teasing that idea in the Divine Mysteries entries. And then one thing I found really interesting that you'll have to see exactly how it plays out. I'm not going to reveal this quite yet.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at God's entry, unless there's someone like Nethys, who is a god of magic, or Abraxas, who's very tied to magic, your divine stat block gives you 3 additional cleric spells, right? You get a first level spell and then 2 other, or first rank spell, excuse me, and 2 other spells. And someone like Nessus gives you 1 at each rank, but it's either 3 or 9, really, is what you're getting.
Right.
But Apsu and Dayhawk are setting a very particular, unique standard that's tied to them specifically, where they're giving you 4 spells, and it'll make sense once you see what's going on with them. But there's just like an extra spell there that they share that is kind of setting up this common theme. There's these interesting things that happen over time with the gods that there are themes that people may not be aware of that have happened in development, and just kind of reinforces some of the ideas behind them. One thing that comes to mind is they're the 3 sun gods of Mazzali. They're Mwangi gods, and they were all themed around the sun and stuff. But in development, I decided that they each also grant the zeal domain. Just I thought the stories that they were telling is like, oh, they are very they have this enthusiasm, they have this drive behind them. Let's add zeal. And I just kind of added zeal to each of them, and now they have this additional connection. Not only do they all have the sun, but they also have the zeal domain among their list. They all share at the very least that domain, regardless of what the other themes are going on. So it's just those kind of things happen here and there, and Apsu and Dayhawk are getting that as well, but reinforced by the spells that they grant.
Okay, super fascinating. Yeah. I like that. That's, I think, really, really cool. It's always hard for me. I was reviewing Qianxia recently, and they released the one snake goddess. I can't remember her name at the moment.
Yeah.
And she got a spell at every rank, and I was just like, this is weird. This doesn't fit the normal convention. So I don't know if this is a flaw or something. It's just because there's so much in the books, like expecting me to remember every little thing. Yeah. I was talking with how it's played, and you talk to him and you ask him any question on the video he's done where he's like, oh no, I probably forgot the rules since then, because there's just so much. Yeah. So that's interesting to hear that there's these intentional design elements, and something that I'll try my best now to keep an eye on for anything that comes up in the future.
Sure.
This next question is, I'm going to combine a few and just make a general sentiment question. A lot of people have been asking, what about remaster content for things that are not from the APG, obviously, that like archetypes or from Secrets of Magic, what about these other remaster things coming that are not from like the initial plan? What are your guys' ideas behind that?
There are times when it will make sense to bring it forward, but I mean, I feel like we've done a generally good job with the remaster maintaining compatibility with the legacy stuff, right? For the most part, it feels like, other than like good, evil, sanctification stuff, exchange those, and dropping the wizard schools. Those are the 2 big ones, right? Everything else does seem to work just fine, right? I've been playing, or the game I'm running, it has been mixing those at the moment. Not really much of a problem, and a lot of those are generally, any hiccups that you run into are generally, hey, work with your GM. It should be pretty obvious what should be happening with this, right? But that doesn't mean we're not going to be remastering stuff along the way. Divine Mysteries is remastering domains, for example, in part because I thought it would be important to get every domain that we've had under one book, and then it's just a lot easier to just reference. Like, what was happening is, like, the Toil domain was technically in Age of Ashes, but then later we updated it, and now it's in Rage of Elements, and Rage of Elements added the Metal and the Wood domain. It's like, okay, technically those rules are remastered rules, but let's make sure they're all under one umbrella, and it's a lot easier to reference and just say go here. Or if you're someone who's playing or picking one of these gods and they feature the wood domain, it would kind of stink to like have to go back to Rage of Elements to read what the wood domain does. No, it's right here. It's all that. So there are definitely chances that we're finding here and there to update stuff that we feel does necessitate it, like these domains that were left behind, not left behind, they didn't have a chance to get a proper update because they were in an AP, right? But beyond that, I think don't expect us to go back and do 100% of everything that we've put out in remastering, because when are we going to get to new material, right? If we have to go and remaster 4 years of older stuff, that's 4 years that you're losing of new material that we could be working on.
By the time you're done with the full 100% remaster, now you have to do the second remaster, the new remaster material.
Exactly. Now we want to be moving forward, but we're going to bring stuff along with us when we can and when it makes sense. You'll actually see, happy to tease this, you'll see updated witch patrons in Divine Mysteries that that haven't had a chance to be updated under the new standard of witches, and I'm like, we have the space, let's do it. So you'll get to see Baba Yaga again, for example.
Always happy to see when Baba Yaga shows up.
That's really cool. Though I'm sure some people are still kind of going to get this little stickler or this little like bramble stuck in their head. Do you guys have any plans to maybe like rework some of the current stuff out, like Magus or some of the archetypes that feel like they just didn't really do super well?
I think we are always talking about this kind of stuff. If and when that happens, we'll definitely announce it. But at the moment, I mean, I got nothing else I can really say beyond like, we know what people are asking for, and we're definitely assessing what we want to like. There are times when we're like, oh yes, it is worth our time to make sure we do this and look at these and get a chance to give these a proper update. But let us know what you think needs updating, remastering, and we'll definitely make sure we assess that and find the time and space for stuff that we know for sure. Yeah, we want to work on that again.
Okay. Hopefully, I was seeing a lot of questions kind of asking generally the same thing. So I hope that helps a lot of people out for sure. Definitely. And
the other thing is, like, even if it's something that we recognize, we want to do that, it does take a while for it to come out, right? Like, we had to make a whole book and then include it in there, and that takes a while before it happens. So some of these wheels are spinning in some cases, and just know that even we internally have to be patient to make sure it's all done correctly and get it out when it needs to.
I love the chat's immediate hype about the witch like tease.
Yeah. To be fair, witch is super popular now.
Which is fun. I've been, like I mentioned early on, like I've been working on a witch character. I'm like super invested in this, and also Mosquito Witch is so cool. Objectively, just like such an interesting patron. I want to play this bug infested poppet so bad, just so bad. And now I'm like, oh, even more. I was gonna get the book already, but if there's more details to make this like Poppet Witch even better, then I gotta get this book like on release.
Yeah, for sure. It's Witch is always so hard because like I review stuff. I give my opinions on them. If people don't like my opinions though, when it comes to Witch, that's a dangerous game.
Sure.
I mean, I like Witch generally, but sometimes something just doesn't click right with me, or I look at it and if I say anything wrong, they're just like, "How dare you?
How dare you?
My Witch baby like that?" I like Witch. I liked Witch before, though. I am very happy that their familiars are now just more unique than any other class. I think that's much needed. Anthony Peterson asks, any plans to publish more fiction based on Pathfinder lore in the future? Also, with the orc, would it be legal to publish fiction based on the rules of Pathfinder 2e as long as nothing proprietary is used?
Um, so the first question with the more fiction, yeah, we're definitely looking into it. We've already announced that there's like even more God's Reign related fiction. In addition to the novel, we're doing, some other e-publication stuff. And I know we're looking more into it. And if everyone buys 5 copies of the God's Reign novel, it'll definitely make it easier to have more novels happen in the future.
Yeah.
Hint, hint.
Make this book sold out. Give it out, everyone. Just like gift it for free to everybody you know.
Yeah, no, we're definitely exploring more avenues. We always have the web fiction on our blogs. Those come out pretty regularly. So at the very least, we hope that scratches some kind of itch a little bit. But yeah, we'd love to keep doing that. And if God's Reign does well, we'll definitely look into doing more going forward. As for doing your own published novel using Orc, but you don't reference any of the setting material, at that point, I don't think you even need the Orc. You're just writing a fantasy novel, right? Yeah, I don't think the Orc license is necessarily the best thing to be publishing under in terms of fiction. I don't know. It's very much oriented more towards the mechanics and stuff. And not to say that like you can't publish. It's more like it's just you don't need to worry about a license. You're just writing fiction at that point. If you're inspired to write something that is very wizardy and fightery and clericy and all that stuff, like our game, I think you can do that. Just don't be Sangularian and all that stuff. Of course, I'm not a lawyer, if maybe Orc is the best way to go, but like look into resources of just publishing fiction, right? If you're inspired by stuff, you can just write some fiction and some high fantasy novels, and maybe you become you end up making something really cool that started its roots with inspiration from Pathfinder. But yeah, don't let yourself worrying about a license hold you back in terms of writing. Just get to writing, and I'm sure you can figure out the best way to handle how it gets published down the line.
Okay, sounds good. Man, I have to crush my friend's dream right now with this next question.
No.
Do we have hope of seeing the Ahsoki tailblading game, taking from the Rat Folk Tailblade from First Edition?
Oh, I don't.
I know.
I don't know.
It's very specific. It's his favorite Ancestry.
He absolutely loved it in the First Edition, and he
We
loved
know-
the fact that he got an extra attack from it, which is
Well,
Feel free to
that's-
crush his dreams. And
I make no promises about it. I know the Rat Folk are in PC2, and that's about all I can tell you. I wish I knew every new weapon that was showing up in that book. So I say don't hold out hope, but for all I know, it's actually in there.
Don't hope, just dream. Don't hope, just dream.
Yeah. I there's a part of me that could be cool and be like, oh yeah, there's definitely cool stuff in there, and like tease the idea that maybe it's in there, but like I'm not gonna do that. I don't want to get your hopes up. But Rat Folk are cool, and I think we get to do cool stuff with them.
Yeah,
That's all I really got.
It's a question. It was here. I have to ask it. So it's just I know how much he loves that Tailblade. Oi Man, ya boy man asks, who does Erasni have a weird bond with, like Nethys and Gorum?
Who does she have a weird bond with? I won't say who it is, but her herald, she's got an interesting dynamic with as a god. It's a core 20 Pantheon god. We wanted to make sure she had a herald because everyone else does. But up to this point, has she had one? No, not really. Have we talked about her having a herald before? No, and it's led to an interesting story beat, I think, for her finding a herald and who it is. They have kind of a shared history that, trauma kind of stuff that leads to them having an interesting dynamic that I think people will hopefully find to be an interesting little bit of story that is going on with her, and also expands who she is. She for a long time was very much, I don't want to talk to anyone, I want everyone to leave me alone, I don't trust anyone. but now she's growing to trust a little bit more, and the Herald is one aspect that shows this happening, the growth that she's undergoing.
Okay.
Nice.
Interesting. I am very interested to see the Erasmus stuff. I think Erasmus is very interesting. So I think that's going to be I think Erasmus is going to be a very popular god.
I think she already is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. But I mean, just now, more especially.
Yeah.
More core. Easy Does It asks, hey, Luis.
Hi.
Are you excited that Wrestler is going to be in Player Core 2? Maybe anything new?
I am excited it's in there. I don't know if it got expanded in any way. I'm sure Mike is like, it was Mike Sayer, who wrote it, is like, it was perfect already. Why do we need to add more to it? I'm excited it's in there.
Really good.
It's so good.
And yeah, I wish I knew well enough if it had any additional stuff added to it or any little tweaks, but I mean, it will come across as a wrestler you know and love, and now be in a core book, so more people are seeing it.
Fair. It's a really, I mean, anyone who's played the game seriously enough knows about Wrestler at this point. Mr. Nana 101 asks, do you have a favorite player option that's coming out in the Qianxia player guide?
Oh boy. I am really into some of the Magus stuff that's coming. I'm gonna just leave it at that.
We did get a little bit of a spoiler with Michael.
Yeah,
James.
I don't want to
names.
Yeah, that is definitely James and Eleanor's book to really spoil more on. But the Magus stuff I saw and helped develop and work on was really cool. Is there anything else? I think the some of the new Ancestry stuff is really cool. Yao Guai is really interesting. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I mean, stuff you already know is coming, but I'm just gonna say it's good. Get excited and just add to the hype.
Add to the hype, yeah. Yeah, another book I'm sure will be full of so many options. I'll spend weeks making videos on with no sleep.
Great archetypes. The Samsarin looks like a delight to play.
Yeah.
Like it
sounds
so fun.
I had a lot of fun developing that and helping come up with some of the stuff going on there too. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff. I'm excited for people to see what's going on there.
Has there been anything in particular throughout your run as creative director that you wanted to change or add that you just weren't able to?
I mean, I think other people have this kind of feeling as well. It's like maybe we didn't need to make the timeline go back 10,000 years, right? That is a lot of time. And when you think about it, in the real world, how much has happened in the last 2024 years, right? So much, right? 10,000 years. It stretches, suspension of disbelief just a little bit in terms of like, how is the setting still what it is, right? And I get it, and it's, tropes of fantasy, things go back so long, but like sometimes we run into like, oh, this complicates matters having this taken so long, right? But for the most part, I don't think I would. There's no like I need to redo this entire thing or whatever that comes to mind. Would it have been nice to have a different scale on the timeline? Sure. Is this what we have? Great, and I can work with it, and we can definitely do it. But it just runs into its own challenges sometimes here and there. And I'm sure a shorter time frame would have also run into other challenges. Right? There's some parallel universe where all this stuff took place in 2,000 years, and we're like, man, I sure wish we would have stretched it out a little bit more, right? Instead, but yeah, for the most part, I love the game and I love the setting. I fell in love with the world, and I wanted to run with that world because of what it is, right? I'm not here to like throw parts out because I'm like I can do it better or anything. It's like, no, I like this world and I just want to build on top of it. I want to add to it. I want to polish it up and make it look even nicer.
That's fair. And to be fair, I don't think anyone expects you to fill every single year in the last 10,000 years.
Oh my gosh.
Galarian.
Yeah.
not a question, but I'm turning it into a question for him so you can crush his dreams further, maybe, or help him. Will we be seeing any future additions to Ancestry weapons?
To like new ancestries or like
Ancestry weapons?
Oh, weapons.
Like, in general.
I think there's a few coming down the pipeline, if I remember right. I can open up Player Core 2 and tell you for sure. I can't tell you. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but I can say, oh, yes, they're happening, or no, they're not happening.
We just have to see the glow on your face and know that you're looking at a book we can't see.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, enhance, zoom, enhance, read off his eyes.
Okay.
I know this friend really loves Ancestry weapons and is sad that there's not more in the game.
Yeah. The Ancestry weapons are cool. There definitely are quite a few in Player Core 2. Some of them are ones you know already. But I was looking through this list. I'm like, are these new? I can't remember. So no promises that any of them are actually new, but they're there. There's definitely ancestral weapons there. The thing is, like, you do run into a challenge mechanically with, hey, if we start putting out a lot more ancestral weapons, what does that mean for the game, and what does that mean for player options and stuff? If we had like 20 weapons with the elf trait, right? Suddenly elf becomes kind of a go-to pick in terms of like getting the best weapon, right? Oh, dwarves have these 3 weapons, but elves have 20. There's obviously going to be something perfect for whatever build you need, and that runs into its own challenges. And we don't want to turn it into an arms race among the ancestries, right?
Yeah.
Everyone having, 2 to 5 is a good balance, and a lot of the times, like, the story behind, like, why is this an orc weapon? Why is this an elf weapon? Why is this a dwarf weapon? Has to make sense, right? We can't just say, oh, all hatchets are gnome weapons for some reason, just because we wanted to give gnomes more stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone can use a hatchet, right? Everyone can use a club, right? We want to make sure that there's something unique and interesting behind it. Something like a flick mace is a lot more interesting, has a lot more story potential, a lot more behind it than a club or a hatchet, right? So we want to make sure these are interesting and tie back to the cultures and the ancestries and stuff in a way that isn't just adding ancestry traits to weapons for the sake of doing so.
Makes sense, and I think it's a good way of looking at it, because it's the two things I think is definitely spinning around with ancestry weapons is there's like so many permutations of like weapon traits, damage dice, until like you start designing the same weapon like multiple times, and then ancestry arms race. Like, we don't want the repeat of the flick mace epidemic, even though I keep joking on our streams that I think it should be at this point just in one book somewhere that maybe it's canon that a bunch of gnomes went on an adoption spree and adopted just an absurd amount of like orphans in Galarian.
Sure.
And like just have like a small little like blurb about like this was a weird canon event that happened in Galarian. Yeah. Because that was a funny random thing that like had to get altered in the game.
All right, we have time for a couple more questions, so I'm going to do a little bit of sifting here. Hey, thanks Zatang for the sub. Okay, here's a really, really good one. Easy Does It as another question. Have you worked with Thurston or anyone else on the Starfinder team in regards of the lore, considering Starfinder 2E is 100% compatible with Pathfinder 2E? Obviously, they'll have separate continuities, but have you helped out at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So us 3 creative directors, me, Thurston Hillman, and James Jacobs, who does the narrative side of Pathfinder, the adventures and stuff. We have a regular meeting where we get back together and it's like, hey, here's what's coming up from our teams. Here's other stuff we might need from your team, stuff like that. But that chat is always open, and occasionally Thirsty's like, hey, we were thinking of doing this or that for Starfinder. Do you have any plans for something like that in Pathfinder sometime soon? We don't. Like, the games are compatible and more compatible than ever, but we also don't want to like tell the same story across both games. To if we wouldn't want to do basically Rune Lords in space and have it be exactly like Rise of the Rune Lords, right? If we would do Rune Lord stuff in Starfinder, we wanted it to have its own take, and do it in a way that only Starfinder can do it and stuff like that. But there's also things like, oh, hey, we don't want to step on the toes of like, Starfinder would not have killed off a god immediately after we killed off Gorham, right? Like that's just like, let's just find other stories to tell and stuff. And there are times where Thirsty will reach out and it's like, hey, do you have any plans with this and this part of the setting or this god or that thing or whatever? So as to make sure, one, that like all that the timeline stuff remains compatible, right? We wouldn't want to suddenly have Starfinder say, oh, before Galarian disappeared, Abadar just like exploded and all this other stuff happened, and it's like, wait, hold on, that might actually still have implications on us, even though we try to keep the timelines running on separate tracks. But there's still a lot of crossover. Like, we don't want to break their toys, and they don't want to break our toys that we're playing with and sharing between us. And then there are times when like there are things that like there's a little crossover potential here and there. Maybe we do want to make sure things line up in a particular way so as to like feel like things dovetail into each other in interesting ways. So nothing I can really say beyond that. Yes, we do talk about stuff, and it leads to interesting conversations, and I'm sure you'll see some of those developments in the coming years.
Okay. I've been in the desperate hunts to try to contact someone from the Starfinder team to try to get a chat with them. So that's definitely going to happen in the next couple of months. I'll reach out to my contacts, see who I can get a hold of. Sure. I know they're very busy right now.
Definitely are.
So I don't want to interrupt anyone, but obviously I'm super interested, and when Starfighter 2E comes out, I'm going to start covering it as well, tandemly on the channel, along with, the other tabletop stuff. I'm not only a Paizo channel, as much as the last week has indicated otherwise. You guys release a book, I'm going to cover the stuff because people want to see it.
Makes sense.
It's my job as a content creator. Last question, and it's a interesting one. Strange question, probably. This is by Hector Vivas, by the way. But will there be more frog-centric content coming?
Yeah. PC2 has the Trip Key Ancestry. You might have known them originally as Grippleys, but now they're Trip Keys, and they get a little bit more space than they had in the past, so we get to expand on them a little bit. So if you were a Gripply fan, I look forward to Player Core 2 giving you some Trip Key love.
All right. Fun. And also, thanks, Anthony Peterson, for the $2 donation with the comment, all roads lead to Absalom. Thank you for that. So, anything you want to leave us with here today? Any kind of information, news about what you're working on, or some cryptic line to...
I feel like I've teased enough fun stuff from Divine Mysteries already, but I will say I tease a little bit more during PaizoCon, during the keynote. And then if you like that tease, then you have to come back later in the day and listen to the God's Reign panel where I talk more about stuff, and you get to see some of the cool art that's coming in that book. So anything Divine Mysteries you've been waiting for, I'll be talking a little bit more then. Otherwise, no, I say, thanks for having me on. If you want to check out what I'm doing, you can always hop over to luisloza.com. And that has links to things I do, my social medias and stuff like that. And that's the easiest way to find what I'm up to.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm always happy to have these kind of conversations. We always get to learn so much more. And it's sad that there's not enough content creators, I think, for like Paizo's current IPs to really... Because as much as like Paizo's done really, really well in the TTRPG scene, it's tragic that still is just but a slice of the overall TTRPG cake, because there's just a lot of people who just don't know. They just don't know what you have to offer. So hopefully
we appreciate everyone that is sticking around with us right now and loves the game at the moment, and spreading the good word of Paizo.
I do the best I can in my way. I'm getting all of my Warhammer 40k like lore audience into this game. I've already swayed a good few people into being like, I should try out Pathfinder. Like doing the I should call her to the Pathfinder stuff on my just couple of videos I've made so far.
Yeah.
So it's working.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Alex, anything you want to leave us off with today?
Yeah, if you want to see lore content at all, swing over to my channel. It's just Glue Boy. It's linked over in Cam's YouTube, or you can just look it up on YouTube. I cover subjects like Warhammer 40k, Vampire the Masquerade, Lancer, and recently, as I mentioned, Pathfinder. I have some fun videos over there. Had to take a slight hiatus. I was in Texas for sister's graduation, so I was busy. I will be coming back soon with some Warhammer stuff and a very fun overview video of a game that's going to get a Kickstarter soon that I discovered recently. It's a very interesting game, so stay tuned to that if you are really interested in really spooky, creepy games set in alt history World War I. So go subscribe if any of that kind of interests you.
All right. As for myself, today is the first day off I've had from making content, and here we are just doing more content for Paizo anyway. So, is it a break? I don't know. I'm gonna say it is, and cope. But I'll be releasing the Wild Morph information tomorrow for those who are interested in the new Druid and Barbarian options from Out of the Wild. It's really cool stuff. I'm very excited for the kind of direction that's going. And as well, I'll be continuing on at least until the book releases next Wednesday, the 22nd. Also, next week, so the book releases, I get 2 days off, or a day off, and then Friday through Saturday, we'll probably have some streams for whatever I deem necessary for PaizoCon as we look into the new information, as they've yet to loosen the chain. Also, follow, subscribe on your platform of choice. We'll be talking about everything that's going to be coming out. I'll be reviewing Player Core 2, all the tabletop stuff happening literally till December. I have to add every single month till December, something new, because D&D had to release their stuff in September. So we get to look at what the new D&D stuff is going to be. Also, stay tuned. It's nothing I can reveal yet, but there's gonna be something big coming, or there's gonna be something big happening as far as the channel is concerned. So, that being the case, I guess that's gonna be it for us. So we'll go ahead and say goodnight.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.